Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre. I'm the tech lead for Databricks Apps. I kind of built the product. This is...
Yes, my name's Doug. I'm a engineering manager at Addepar, and I manage our data platform team built on Databricks and AWS.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about governance and authorization and authentication with Databricks Apps. Apps are more complicated than notebooks. Everyone in Databricks is used to notebooks. So we thought about, let's go into the details about this. I'm going to present the conceptual and what we wanted to achieve with the product. And then Doug is going to present his experience of using it and how he put it to practice at Addepar. Sounds good? If you have any questions at the end, we will open up for a Q&A. It should be good. This is just so you guys don't trust me for anything that I say. So notebooks versus apps. There are different authorization models. The way notebooks work is that you have a single user script. The authorization model is like, here's my laptop, go and run this thing. It runs from beginning to end, it ends. That's simple, all it is. Everyone in Databricks know what a PAT. It's funny that we call it PAT token, but it's just personal access token. Apps are slightly different. The app is always running. There are multiple users at the same time in the app. And the app itself has other things that it owns, goes to the database or not. And that is not, so it itself has its own authorization. So you have the user's authorization and the app now. We're talking a lot about agents. I put the little robot agent there because a lot of apps are becoming agentic. So we have to think about apps as their own users in this context. The way I like to think is that either during an app server, you either act on behalf of the end user of the app or you act on behalf of the app itself. So kind of like setting up. So if you see in a lot of our competitors, they try to simplify. I actually did not. I tried to keep it as open as possible. Let's show you a little execution. That is like the basic thing that you can do in an app. You will need those two authorizations. You go to a database, read the user session. The user have no business having authorization to your database. It's the app's database. You use the app service principal for that. Now, you go and query the SQL warehouse. You have to honor unit catalog, the authorization. That way, you have to act on behalf of the end user because you want to make sure that the data is secure the way from beginning to the end. You get the result set, you change a little bit the user session, we're saving the DB, using the service principal again. So doing a single request in the app, you use two different authorization models. And that's very powerful because now you can actually build full-blown applications. They're not toy dashboards anymore. They are full-blown applications. And that's one, and because of the multi-user and the identity of the app, every app gets its own service principal, and also we pass on via headers the information of the specific user. Because the context of the user is only throughout that request. And the request headers is how I pass. App developers don't need to worry about how the authentication works and all of that. They just need to know what they need the app to do and get the request. So just a little summary here. Notebooks is single user. Notebooks just runs. App doesn't run. App starts. And then once it starts to getting requests, that's when you need to think to write code to know, like, I'm going to use the app authorization or the end user authorization. Cool. Another very important concept, and everything that we do in this is about privilege escalation. The goal here is to prevent unintended privilege escalation. You can be a little idealistic and say that we never want unintended privilege escalation, but actually in practice, there are a few use cases that you want some privilege escalation. I'll explain what. But that's the goal, and it's a very important concept. any user in the system cannot have access and use apps to work around the authorization that they already have. Apps is not a way to do that. And I think apps is also different from notebooks because of the two. You have to think about privilege escalation from the developer and the user. The developer cannot get more access because of a user logs into the app, and the user cannot get more access because it logged in the app. So there's both ways that we need to think. Normally, I see a lot of customers thinking only one way, but you have to think about both. So how does it work? The principle of least privilege is that developers have a set of permissions. An app has a strict subset of those permissions. An app does not get the whole permission of the user, of the creator. An admin creates an app, now the app can change IP echoes in the workspace. That's not the case. Should not be the case. So only what the app needs to do is granted permissions to. The user, on the other hand, has not a subset, there's a different, but there is an intersection of the user's permission on the app permission. And in an ideal scenario, an app or the user would only have access to the intersection. So there is no privilege escalation. And that goes from assets to rows, right? So everything. However, full intersection is impractical in a lot of the cases, and that's why we added OAuth consent. So I'm creating an application platform. I'm focusing on the authorization model that developers know. That's OAuth. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. There's already a way to do this. But for example, let's say the developers need to create an HR application. They will not have access to every row in the HR table, but the users of that application might want to have access to rows that the developer never had to. So at some point, there is some need for privilege escalation. And the key part here is is that governance on how that app gets deployed and developed through Git source code controls and reviews and whatnot. And the other is that you need to, when you're interacting with the application and the application wants to act on your behalf, you need to be given a chance to think about it, especially if you're a power user. An app comes and say, just typical app store stuff. You start an app in your phone and the app is like, I want to use a camera. And you're like, this is a Sudoku app. And same in Databricks, instead of the microphone or whatever, it would be like, oh, this app wants to read your secrets. Give a little thinking about why this app wants to read your secrets. It prevents a few other things too. It's like you can create little Go links or little short links, share with someone. If there's no consent, it's kind of like you can do some very nasty stuff like phishing things, and that's just not a thing for apps. So in general, I think this is what I wanted to build, which is like a powerful authorization model that you can actually create full-blown applications. But we have a long way in transparency in Databricks to move from batch notebook authorization to an app authorization. Our Auth model is just starting. I think OAuth is only like 2 years old in Databricks, and IAM takes a long time to evolve in a company this big. So we have a long way to go, but that's kind of the direction that we want to go. Now, I want to welcome Doug to go through how does it look like in practice?
All right, awesome. Hey, everybody. So how I'm going to go through this, first, I do want to explain a bit about what Addepar is. We're a financial services company. We sell software to asset wealth managers, and I think that's really important because it highlights why governance and the kind of authentication model we're talking about is so important because we deal with a lot of sensitive client data. I apologize, some of these might look a little like marketing, but again, I think it's important to kind of show our journey. Then I'm going to talk about the apps that we're building inside Addepar to really facilitate getting more data into our company, which is kind of like our life and blood. So like I mentioned, Addepar this is some nice marketing approved screenshots, but this is kind of what our product is. It's a reporting and analytics app We do a lot of other kind of products like trading, alternatives data management, and document ingestion. But really what we're trying to do is aggregate a lot of data from a lot of different sources for our clients and present it in ways that they can kind of tell stories to the clients that they manage. Just again, who are we dealing with when I say like who are Addepar's clients? We service some of the largest kind of banks in the world, and we deal with a lot of international clients as well. And that's, again, very important to how we kind of have to think about approaching using something like Databricks Apps, because we do have to deal with things like building an EU, Addepar's global data centers. How do we kind of keep ourselves compliant with things like GDPR and any other region that we're kind of scaling to? There's a lot going on this slide, but really, again, I think it's just important to highlight why we use Databricks in the first place. You can see it's kind of central here, and I think that's the main takeaway for everything on the outside rim, and that's what Addepar is. It's all the products we have, it's all the things that we sell. These are things making us money, but at the end of the day, Addepar is basically our data, and data is very kind of intertwined with our DNA, and it's something that, again, we've really kind of consolidated everything onto a central platform. And I think, one thing I've kind of discovered since we've been working with Andre on apps and everything else and kind of starting to use them is I found that they're very, very compelling to operationalize a lot of things that we want to do in a very complex ecosystem, managing data, building more pipelines, and getting things in faster. Again, kind of this is our view of the world. It's trying to expand as quickly as we can and build as many feeds as we can. And that's really the hardest problem that Addepar has to solve. We want to expand to different regions, and we need to, in doing so, we need to work with different, they're called custodians, and different maybe market data providers that we have to integrate into our core platform. To do that, we have a very large engineering, analytics, and operations team that kind of manage 500 plus pipelines every single day, kind of working to bring data in, transforming it to Addepar's common data model, and then making it available to our clients. So these are, again, because we're doing this globally, a tight governance model with something like UC has been kind of foundational to support this at a global scale. And this is really what our vision for getting the feed build process to look like is. It's a pizza tracker. We want to be able to make the feed build process so streamlined, so easy, that it just has different steps that different people follow in different stages, and we end up with a data feed at the end of the day that's ready to get production data into our core product. Addepar deals with a lot of very complex ETL kind of pipelines. It's not easy to go from those 500 different kind of integrations I mentioned to one common data model, and building them quickly has been kind of our biggest challenge. And one of those challenges, I think that's the most kind of integral, is actually just, we actually saw today in the keynote, how do we have the analytics, the business domain experts work with data engineers and kind of partner together to build these. And one thing that we've found to kind of be a very compelling way to kind of streamline that so far has been Databricks Apps. And really what we want to do is democratize the way that we build feeds on Databricks using Databricks Apps and using, again, this very kind of tight governance model. And we're putting pretty much everything kind of consolidating it together into Databricks Apps. But that's not exactly where we started, of course, because Databricks Apps are fairly new. Like Andre was saying, we first started kind of operationalizing and making things easier to do for non-technical users using notebooks, which made a lot of sense at the time. They're very good as scripts, and we really started to get into this habit of multiplying them very quickly. You can see the face is getting a little bit more frowny. As we kind of made our feed build process more complicated, and we had to handle more corner cases, getting different kind of feeds kind of online, we started adding new notebooks so that analysts, and again, non-technical users of our platform could do more themselves. And it kind of started to multiply like this. Now we're managing production configuration tables using notebooks. We're driving analytics using notebooks and a bunch of widgets kind of stored at the top. And it started to really kind of fall flat. And we weren't really sure exactly what to do because we ended up with a folder in Git that had 10 notebooks. New people were getting onboarded. They didn't know which ones to go to. They also didn't know which ones they were permissioned to use because we do have a lot of different personas in our UC groups and built on Unity catalog and everything There are some operators would be able to modify production configuration tables. Some were just analysts and wouldn't be able to do that. Some were developers or fees engineers wanting to run like a pipeline potentially. And having a bunch of notebooks like this is not a very conducive way to run anything, actually. And that's where Databricks apps come into. So what I'm showing here on the screen actually are some screenshots of our kind of internal Databricks app that we are building to kind of consolidate all of these features together under one roof. It's again, being deployed to multiple regions. We're expecting its kind of peak kind of usage will be around 50 to 60 users per day. And we're supporting a lot of different personas at once. And I'm going to walk through again, just because I think it's interesting. I don't know if how many people in this room have built a Databricks app, but I want to kind of, again, give some insight into what we've built. I think that could inspire maybe, we've seen just how easy it is to make an app these days. Maybe that can inspire people to help solve problems, solve your own challenges that you have at your own company. So on this slide, we're looking at a way to do ingestion easily into Databricks just through a UI. And this is something that, again, I find very compelling because in our world, we have to deal with a lot of different proprietary, different data formats. We deal with JSON files, XML, CSVs. They have to be parsed differently. We, of course, all know there's different ways of delivering CSV files and everything. So we wanted to streamline that ingestion process. Again, what used to be a notebook with, I can't even imagine how many different configurations baked into it, is now being re-envisioned as a single pane of glass in an app. And one thing that we are actually doing that I think is, again, kind of important to show here, I'm trying to use the laser pointer, but in the bottom right, we actually run a lot of AI and ML processes on top of this data to kind of help analysts move things through the pipeline more quickly. Again, in that idea of there being a pizza tracker, we want to reach insights and get to production data as quickly as we can. So we do a lot of automated things like schema mapping, kind of, again, mapping different proprietary ways of modeling securities to our own kind of internal format. And these are things that analysts can just do and run as buttons instead of it being going to another notebook or figuring out which compute to attach to and everything else. It's a much more streamlined experience. This is another kind of example of something we've built into the app, which is behind the scenes. We're using Genie and a lot of other AI BI tools, but how do we talk with the data that we have and kind of, again, get analysts up to speed quickly on what is going on with new data we ingest? It's no surprise maybe that with over 500 feed builds, we get a lot of very crappy data. So we do have to kind of work back and forth with those providers to understand decisions they've made or why something looks a certain way. And we're accelerating the process of kind of getting to the insight of understanding what's wrong using AI faster. And you can kind of see here, it's maybe a little hard to see, but we have a question we're kind of asking, like, why are there so many transactions with zero cache value? So that's something that, again, we're plugging into SQL warehouses, we're plugging into Genie, and we're figuring out a way to kind of bring everything together into one place, again, under one roof as an application to show back to the user. And lastly, again, this is kind of showing off the fact that we have, again, multiple personas kind of operating under one roof. But we do things like modify configuration mapping tables in production using, again, a person that would be kind of provisioned to do that. So an analyst who's working on a feed build and maybe using some of those other tools wouldn't necessarily have the ability to go and modify, again, this table that we're looking at right here. And we're doing it through a UI. What used to have to be done by uploading a CSV potentially and syncing that to a Delta table. Instead, we're just giving them kind of one easy experience to kind of do everything, again, immediately just with the UX, which people have been, I think every one of the people we demo this to and show it to and are rolling out to as like a beta is obsessed with the fact that we have this ability now. And it's made so easy by, again, on behalf of user authentication. So it's, again, very important to us that we have this feature now. In fact, I would say the app of our dreams that we wanted to build wouldn't have been possible until features like this came out. We definitely have very, again, tight controls on who can access what type of data. And being able to very easily take a user's token in that request header Andre mentioned and just pass it through to any kind of requests or anything we're doing in Databricks makes it much easier, much safer to do this type of development and make these, and kind of democratize things and make it things as so self-service as we wanted them to be, basically. Again, this is an example of dealing with different geographies, but I, as a US employee, couldn't go and run anything on a SQL warehouse as my user in the EU on client EU data. An EU analyst could. And these are things that, again, are kind of showcasing. This is one example of many, but we're really showcasing, again, I think the power of, we wouldn't be able to do this without on behalf of authentication. And until we could do that, something like this would have been difficult to build. We can't just give our service principal that is backed by the app permission to a ton of data aimlessly in our Unity catalog. That would have been a no-go from any kind of governance standpoint. But what is great is that we do have this kind of split head model where we can run some actions as a service principal. So in our app, we want to try to asynchronously collect feedback. And we actually do, until the announcements kind of yesterday, we were managing user session state and UC volumes as well. But we can run some actions as a bot, basically, and that's the service principal backing the Databricks app. Being able to easily flip and switch between a user running a SQL warehouse, getting maybe some feedback from like that AI/BI Genie or anything else, and then easily being able to submit feedback for us to submit back to the volume as a system user is, again, critical, because there are definitely some actions we want to run as that system user, as that service principal, for like kind of more monitoring, auditing, collecting things. But again, that service principal doesn't have any access to our actual data. And that's really enabled, again, us to build this type of app. It's enabled us to feel a lot safer about how we roll it out to anybody. And again, it's giving us a lot of flexibility in how we develop apps and how we think about them as really complex, all-in-one solutions to drive processes as analysts and those less technical users at Addepar. So I made this slide maybe a month ago, and I think it's already pretty out of date. Databricks moves very quickly. But I do think it's still kind of important to what challenges we saw, at least at the time when we were developing apps. And that was difficult state management, which I think Andre will talk about, and that's something that I think is being solved with things like Lakebase. But we do have, as our apps are growing in complexity, managing that session state was important. It was a little difficult to do with Streamlit, which is the framework that we were using. Again, I mentioned we had a solution where we're kind of saving all the Streamlit state as a JSON blob and pushing it to UC volume and loading it. It was hacky for sure, and I think we're going to be very glad to move to something that's like Lakebase. Sharing apps more easily. I think I stole this, I didn't come up with this, but going from URL to data, again, for our entire organization is something that I, again, have a big vision for. I think we're starting with this kind of feed-building Databricks app, but my goal is to move to a lot of other problems we have to solve at Addepar. And it's very hard to imagine an easier way to kind of do URL to data and show insights with these types of more complex apps than, again, Databricks apps. But getting to a point where we can actually let users at Addepar provision with something like Okta, which we use for SSO, without actually needing to be in the Databricks account, is something that would be convenient. And lastly, I think what's always important to us is just more system and audit tables and observability. As we build much more complex apps and they have different requirements from our users on uptime and bugs and issues, it's going to be very important to make sure that we actually do collect, again, who is using it, what features are getting more traction, and again, how do we make sure that they're actually running and that the user is having a good experience, essentially. So that's kind of my portion about how Addepar is using Databricks apps, what we've built, and again, why being, again, a very financial services forward company, I think the governance model that we have now with On Behalf Of has been so critical in our journey of actually being able to build it.
Thanks, Doug. So, like Doug was saying, and we have lots more to do. The three things that I'm working on right now that are like top of my mind is at some point that we need to add external IDP integrations. We need to make sure that your users, your organization, if you use Okta, Bueno, GitHub, I don't care, don't even need to be in an account of Databricks to be able to use application apps, Databricks apps. The thing stopping this is that somehow there needs to be, I need to build a system to do a token exchange to a Databricks authorization for data. So those users are not known to Databricks. What data, how does that map to UC? So I need to do some work on that side. There are some ways to do it, but it is work. The other thing I really want to do is enforce Git optionally. Today you can write a file in the workspace and just deploy from there. If you are dealing with some highly sensitive data and applications that are touching some stuff that you need to have more governance over that. And I think one of the best ways that I can do is just follow the normal standard development process that you guys already have. So we enforce that and say, like, you have to have a proper GitHub. You have to go through the CI/CD pipelines that you already have and treat source code of Databricks apps like any other source code in the organization. And the third one is we need to have much, much tighter controls of the on behalf of. Ideally, the way I want to get this is that the most useful on behalf of authorization will be just the data. You don't even need to give authorization to the warehouse, for example. The warehouse is delegated from the service principal, and you can collect it down to the scope to say that for this user, while using this app, the app can only have access to read this catalog or this table. Go down to that level and mix permissions with the auth scopes. So I want to make, so that's going to be a little roadmap, but that's the goal. And of course, there's a lot more that we have to do with audit logs and system tables, but not just that. I want to make sure that you guys can log your own stuff and go fast to your workspace and have your own observability of apps. So we're working on like fast ingestion of open telemetry data, so you can instrument your own app however you want and have your own standards of how to do telemetry with applications. And like this is top of my mind. And I know that governance and security are very hot topics, so go to town, ask me anything. Because it's controversial sometimes.